Okay, so welcome again, everyone, and thank you all for joining the webinar on exporting leather bags and accessories to Europe. I'm very happy to see we have so many people from all over the world joining us today. So my name is Mert van der Gaas. I am a program manager at CBI, and I will be your moderator for today. Before we get started, let me just explain something about GoToWebinar, the tool that we're using for this session. If you can go to the next slide. So GoToWebinar is a very simple tool. It only has a few elements in the menu. First of all, kindly be informed that we cannot hear or see you. So you can wave at us, but we won't be able to notice. However, you do have a couple of options to post questions in the field under questions. I really encourage you to do so throughout the whole session. We might not be able to answer all of your questions, but we will do our best to select most of the questions and answer them at the end of the session. Also, please be informed that on the background, there's another CBI colleague of mine available to answer some of your questions. And finally, this webinar is recorded and will be published on our website for further review or sharing. So today I am not here alone. I'm very excited to introduce you to three wonderful speakers who really have in-depth knowledge on the leather industry. They know the main developments, the trends, the requirements, and of course, best practices. So Leontina, Giovanni, Peter, I see you've all turned on your camera, so the audience will know what you look like. Thank you so much. So if you can go to the next slide, let me show you what we have in store for you by quickly running through today's agenda. So after we have a very short introduction from my side, we will hear from Leontina, who's a supply chain and fashion industry expert with over 15 years of experience working and living in Asia. And Leontina will share valuable insights in terms of trade data, consumer behavior, buyer requirements, relevant EU legislation. And then we will proceed with a presentation from Giovanna Beatrice, who's a lead research apparel on behalf of CBI, which is an incredible wealth of experience on building bridges between supply and demand, offering advice in terms of export strategies, marketing, CSR, you name it. And Giovanni will talk about market opportunities, trends, and innovations. And then, of course, we will hear from Peter. And Peter is a sustainability expert with 15 years of experience in the leather goods marketing and production. And Peter will share the best practices on how to make leather production more sustainable. And then at the end, as I mentioned before, we will conclude with a Q&A where our experts will answer any questions that you might have. But again, before I give the floor to our speakers, let me just tell you quickly about CBI, organization that I'm working for. So some of you might already know who we are, but for those who are joining us for the very first time, let me quickly tell you who we are and what we do. So CBI basically stands for the Center for the Promotion of Imports from Developing Countries. And our main mission is to support the transition towards sustainable and inclusive economies. We do this by connecting SMEs from developing countries to the European and regional markets, and thereby focusing on promoting and creating decent jobs, specifically for women and youth, as well as stimulating sustainable trade and production. So the SMEs are our starting point. And we offer practical solutions to eliminate bottlenecks experienced in the value chain. And in many cases, these barriers can, for example, be a lack of market information. So we have a twofold approach. First, we implement projects in developing countries where we help prepare SMEs to successfully enter international markets, providing them with tailor-made and hands-on assistance based on their specific needs. This can be support in terms of export marketing, matchmaking, product development, branding certification, CSR, and so on. And secondly, we provide market information on how to export your products and services to the European markets. And via our projects, we support on average around 600 SMEs per year, for which we work very closely with a diverse group of local stakeholders, from sector associations to export promotion agencies, ministries, and so on. Over the years, we have built a very extensive network of international and local experts that we actively involve in our projects. CBI is active in 23 countries, mainly in Africa, and we're based in The Hague, the Netherlands, and part of the Netherlands Enterprise Agency, RVO, and funded by the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs. For the sake of time, I really won't be delving so much more in our activities, but let me just quickly tell you about the market intelligence services, which is also what we're talking about today. So we have over 30 years of experience in developing high quality market intelligence reports about the European market for local SMEs and business support organizations. This can be market studies, market access requirements, product fact sheets, for example, on the leather bags, sportswear, sustainable materials, and so on. And we publish every year around 300 market studies on our website. It's very crucial to know that all these studies are freely accessible and can be found on the CBI website. Our work spans across 14 sectors, predominantly in agriculture, but we also work obviously in the apparel sector, as well as tourism and IT outsourcing. Please make sure to stick around till the end of this webinar, as I will be happy to give you a quick tour to the website and show you where to find these studies. But for now, I would like to give the floor to Leontina and share her experience.
Thank you very much, Mirta. So thanks for the introduction as well. I'll just introduce a little bit about my background. After graduating from university with a degree in international business management, I moved to Asia, where I worked for almost 15 years for 3 different textile and apparel manufacturers, and I was focused on new business development. Since 2017, when I moved back to Europe, I've used what I learned in the field to advise brands and manufacturers on best practice. And my focus has been increasingly on social and environmental responsibility. So that's me. And Franz, we can go ahead to the presentation. So when we're looking at the market for leather goods, leather accessories and bags, we need to think about, obviously, the consumer. What motivates Europeans to purchase leather goods? What does leather mean for Europeans? For Europeans, it's a long history in Europe, and buying leather goods is an investment for them. It's something that leather goods showcase for them their values, and these values have always been about quality, style, taste, tradition and craftsmanship, durability, because leather is a very durable material. So, leather, the idea that leather can last a lifetime is very important and really intrinsic to leather goods and their value to consumers. Next slide. But there's a flip side. What might motivate Europeans to buy less leather or choose alternatives to leather? And this is something that we're starting to see. Cost is a big concern. 17% of people who actually actively seek to buy faux leather, do so for price. There's always been animal welfare concerns. Many groups in Europe are very concerned about that, and they lobby and they protest. The number of vegans in Europe are really increasing year on year. So this is something that's becoming more and more important in Europe that may influence consumer behavior. There's also environmental concerns. Many Europeans are starting to consider both social and environmental impact when they're shopping these days, and these will all have an impact on how the leather industry evolves. Particularly environmental. This is something that's quite new, but many people don't realize the environmental impact of leather. The Sustainable Apparel Coalition has said that it's the 3rd most environmentally impactful material to produce. It's all about animal rearing, the impact from each stage, including in processing. Many toxic substances are used, or they're released during processing of the animal hides into leather. This can impact negatively on worker safety, human health, and the environment. And there's also waste. There's a huge amount of waste. So if we just go to the next slide, Franz, we can just show you a few statistics. the huge amount of leather's carbon footprint actually occurs from animal rearing, something that people don't often think about. There's a lot of deforestation and land degradation as a result. In terms of toxic substances, this is a very hot topic for leather. And if we go to the next slide, Franz, we can show you, many of you will know all about this if you're in the leather industry, but various toxic substances are released or used, which, as I said, impact on human health as well as the environment. Biocides are used for preventing the growth of bacteria. On the hides, formaldehyde is an ingredient in many leather chemicals, including preservatives and tanning agents. PFAS is a very hot topic again at the moment in Europe because consumers are becoming very aware of the negative impact. They are forever chemicals that don't break down in the environment or the human body. So these are used for oil repellents, stain repellents, and water repellents. Chlorinated paraffins in the fat liquoring process. VOCs, they are emitted very easily into the atmosphere. They happen, they occur with the use of dyes or adhesives, solvents, and finishing agents. Heavy metals are often used in the tanning process, and particular chromium salts, which are used for tanning. 75% of tanning of leather is chrome tanned, and that can lead to the production of chromium-6, which is very, very damaging to human health. When it's not treated properly. So, here's a list of all the different results of toxic substances use, and we will talk later about what the European legislation is doing about that. Next slide, we can go to waste. Just to say, 1,000 kilograms of raw hide will result in about 150 kilograms of leather. So there's a lot of waste in every stage of the production process. Next slide. So, having presented all of that to you, you might sort of say, well, what does this mean for the leather goods industry? And my answer is a bit complicated. It's, does it mean that the leather goods industry is doomed? And my answer is yes and no at the same time. But what I actually mean by that is that the leather goods industry, as it is at the moment, is doomed. It's not going to be the same in the future. It will be redefined, and that provides opportunities, as we will see. So when I say yes, it's doomed, what I mean is that really in the future, plant-based vegan alternatives are the future of more sustainable leather. So by leather, I mean materials that can make goods that traditionally leather would have done. There are many on the market, or starting to come onto the market now, and I'm sure Giovanni will talk more about that in his section on trends and innovations. But having said that, that future is very far away. There's problems with scale and durability and quality issues with that need to be overcome before they can really come to scale. So when I say it's not doomed, I'm talking about the fact that with increased sustainability, faux leather will shrink. The market for fake leather will shrink as consumer sustainability behavior increases. And also, let's not forget that leather is or can be seen as a sustainable product due to its durability. It's a really good fit for all the circular models that the EU is promoting, rental, repair, and resell. So if you look at it from a life cycle perspective, leather can be very sustainable. So we can't write it off and say, oh, it's unsustainable. It's going to disappear. Next slide. So when I say it's being redefined, the industry is being redefined. The basis on which companies will compete is changing. If you want to participate in this industry, if you want to be a manufacturer in this industry, you will have to make sure that your production is responsible. You'll have to make sure that your supply chain is transparent. And as we will see, this is due to legislation, not only consumer behavior, but also legislation, which will be forcing buyers and retailers and brands to change their business models. Next slide. Right, so before we look at the different trends that are in detail that are shaping the redefining of the industry, let's have a look at some the current state of play in the industry and what's happening in terms of trade. Yeah. Okay, so what we're seeing is the apparel industry growth from 2017 to 2022 was 6.75% per year on average. And in comparison to that, the leather accessories and bags sector was experienced quite a slow growth at just 2.7%. We've touched on already some of the reasons for that, price pressure, should I say, fast fashion, which is, the apparel industry is very much fast fashion, whereas leather is slower by design, really. There's animal welfare, there's environmental concerns, and the growth of faux leather, which obviously is particularly relevant for the budget and middle segments. Next slide. So if we look at the different categories within leather bags and accessories, we will see that handbags are actually about 95% of all bags. They represent as much as 57% of all bags and accessories. So it's a huge segment. It's also the fastest growing segment. And what we are seeing here is that worn accessories and handbags, which are also worn, are performing best. They're not only the largest categories, but they are also growing. And this, in my view, is consumers use visible pieces to show their values, their personalities, and their status. When it comes to leather, it's all about status and quality. So these are the categories that really is important for leather, and people, consumers will buy leather to perform that role. Next. So, and particularly handbags, that's the one that is on the person. It's a real reflection of your values. Now, in terms of exports, the EU has a long tradition of production as well. Italy was the birthplace of luxury leather goods. It's a huge industry. France and Italy, as you can see here, is 85% of all exports of leather goods, and it's represented by France and Italy. And if you compare the growth here, we've got 8.4% growth in exports. But if we go to the next slide, we can sort of explain that a little bit. It doesn't sound, it's not such a massive difference when you explain it in terms of EU exports also includes re-exports. So a portion of the exports we're seeing within from the EU is actually products that were originally manufactured outside the EU, in developing countries and other countries. So this portion is not in direct competition with imports from developing countries, but what it shows is that there is a large markup on EU branded exports. So they're imported, they are branded and re-exported. And if you're looking at the export value, the massive part of the difference is in that. We can see this by the fact that the top importers in Europe of leather accessories and bags are also the top exporters. So there's a lot of re-export. And then we have these 5 key regional distribution hubs of Spain, France, Italy, Germany, and the Netherlands. Spain, France, and Italy being production companies, whereas the Germany and the Netherlands are really more just redistribution hubs. Next slide. Okay, so looking just at the production that's outside Europe and imports from those countries, we can see that China is really experiencing negative growth, 4.4% negative growth, particularly in accessories. So this presents an opportunity for suppliers to, as China is diversifying away from from apparel into higher value manufacturing, this the buyers are diversifying their production to other countries. So particularly for accessories, we see an opportunity here. Right, so if we're looking at direct sourcing from developing countries, let's compare it to the apparel industry. So 49.5% of apparel is sourced from developing countries. Those are 2022 statistics. If we look at the accessories, both worn accessories and non-worn accessories are all at least 10% lower than that. So this again shows that there is a strong industry in Europe, as well as I said, the branding element. But if we look at bags, only just less than 10% of imports of handbags, or bags actually in general, are from developing countries. Again, this reiterates the fact that handbag is the ultimate statement piece. It shows your values. And when it comes to leather, those values are quality, durability, style, tradition. The Made in Europe label or branding is very important. Now, let's keep that in our heads when we talk further about other leather alternatives, because in the same way, I foresee that in the future, plant-based alternatives conveying values of sustainability and eco-friendliness, handbags would be expected to be an important item for that. So we could probably expect in the future that for plant-based alternatives, handbags will be a very important segment. Next slide. Okay, so when we're talking about redefining the industry, we've touched on consumer priorities, and we will go on to talk about what's the context in terms of legislation, but also how does that translate into buyer requirements, and what does that mean for suppliers? Next slide. Okay, so we've talked about how changing consumers' behaviour. The statements they make are changing. Like we said, you know, they want to show that they care about the environment. They want to show that they want to consume less. Europe is a great market for clothing rental, and that it also extends to items such as handbags. It's no longer unfashionable to be eco-friendly. And Europeans are really starting to buy more sustainable items, and these are coming through in the statistics that we're seeing in Europe. This is being facilitated by legislation. Legislation is empowering consumers, it wants to give them the information they need to make informed choices for sustainability. Next slide. So I think we've all heard about the Green Deal. It's a set of policy initiatives the European Union wants to become climate neutral by 2050. Its focus is on circularity, recycled products, recyclable products, and zero use of hazardous chemicals. It's about durability, it's about slower fashion, and it's about producers taking responsibility. And the EU has really highlighted the textiles and clothing sector as a sector that not only needs to change, but also when it does change, can make a significant contribution to climate change. Next slide. So under the EU Green Deal, there are 3 focus areas which are really relevant for this sector. There's greenwashing, anti-greenwashing. There's a new Green Claims Directive that has been proposed, which will actually require companies to prove any claims they make about environmental benefits or social benefits as well, with data, with actual proof. And this is really relevant for the vegan leather, for example. 74% of consumers find the term vegan leather very confusing, and quite often, it suggests that it's sustainable, but actually a lot of vegan leather is only sustainable from the point of view of animal welfare. A lot of it uses PU leather. Even the plant-based ones at the moment use PU coating or bioplastics, which are also not environmentally friendly or biodegradable. So a lot of work needs to be done to give the consumers accurate information, and that will come from the buyers and from the suppliers. Secondly, chemicals management. The EU REACH legislation is the most strict legislation in the world on chemicals management. And for example, France has already gone further than that. They require that at point of sale, even on the websites or in stores, the brand or retailer must inform consumers about any product that has a substance that is on the REACH substance of very high concern list. So this is becoming stricter and stricter. As I said, a main focus relevant for the leather industry is on fast chemicals or forever chemicals. The third key area of legislation focuses on transparency. And it will become, I think it's 2026, that it will become essential that buyers provide a digital product passport for every product on the EU market. So this will be a digital record of everything relating to the product throughout its life cycle. Next slide. So these legislation is forcing buyers to change their business models. So their requirements of suppliers are increasing. Buyers will issue a manufacturing restricted substances list or a restricted substances list to their suppliers. They will require them to comply with that in terms of hazardous chemicals and the restriction of hazardous chemicals. If suppliers don't comply with that, it could mean the termination of their relationship. They're also requiring openness and access to data. So they're trying to map their supply chains all the way back and trace the products through the supply chains. So the collection of data regarding impact, chemicals, environmental impact, and social impact will be really important. These requirements also represent a good opportunity for suppliers. They can add value if they do it right and they focus on these aspects. Next slide. So, as I said, these manufacturers that can and want to support buyers' needs for reliable data will have competitive advantage. Those that have a fully functioning chemicals management system, they can prove through third parties such as ZDHC that they don't use hazardous chemicals. Those that monitor their suppliers throughout their supply chain, their own suppliers, their tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. Those that have facility certification and those that collect that data from their suppliers, they will have competitive advantage. And those buyers will prioritize those suppliers as partners. We will see that that buyers will consolidate their sourcing to supplier partners that really can deliver on those key things that they need. And also manufacturers that will be able to continuously innovate. They will be really important for buyers going forward. And this is where I'm going to hand over to Giovanni as I call him, the king of innovation. So he will explain more about all the trends and opportunities on the market for leather goods.
Thank you so much, Leontina. I think you did a really wonderful opportunity to introduce our next speaker. So thank you so much for the insightful presentation from your side. It's very encouraging to hear that the leather industry is not doomed, but is in fact being redefined. So for more insights in terms of trends and innovation, I now would like to give the floor to Giovanni.
Thank you, Leontina, for the amazing compliment. Leontina, Queen of Data. So my name is Giovanni Beatrice, and I've been working in the fashion industry for over 30 years, of which also years in the footwear and leather industry. And yes, I'm triggered and inspired by innovation, and I think in opportunities, and that's what I would like to share with you all. Next slide, Frans. So I'm scared when I see these pictures on the internet. It scares me because I realize that the industry needs to change. It is dirty, and we want to protect our earth for the next generations to come. But where do you start? Where do you begin? I'm only one person, or you are only perhaps one company. So what do you do? We've been trying, our government has been trying for many years. They have requested it friendly, please change, please do better, but everybody is price pressured and change is difficult. And that's why, as Leontina also explained, new legislations have been introduced, and a law means there is no other way than the right way. You need to comply. Next slide. So if I look at the market, I see two kinds of consumers. I see a consumer that is focused on the story to a product, preferably a sustainability story. And I see a consumer that is focused on the product only. They buy a product because it's beautiful, because the price is good, because the quality is good, for different reasons. And of course, there's overlap. Consumer A is also focused on product, and consumer B is also inspired by a story. But for me, these are two different kinds of consumers. Consumer A, that is focused on sustainability, is growing, correct. But they have one thing in common, and for all consumers, price is still essential. And that is a mentality mindset that we hopefully can change in the near future, because things will get more expensive. So next slide. So yes, EU Green Deal, there are a lot of new legislations, and Leontina has highlighted several. And I would like to look at the opportunity of one of these legislations, which is focused on durability. We don't want consumers to buy a product, use it 2 months, and then throw it away, which is the fast fashion. We don't want that. We want consumers, and that is the picture in my head is that I buy this beautiful bag of leather, I cherish it, I take care of it, and when I grow old, my son will take it, and then after, his son will take it. I think leather is one of the only products and qualities where that is possible. And in fact, leather becomes only more beautiful after years of use. So I think that looking at leather as a dirty product, that is true. And that for sure is something we need to change immediately. But the positive thing about leather is the durability and the beauty of a skin, of a natural product that is in fact in many countries a waste product. So that's where the opportunity is, I feel. Next slide. So if we look at the different layers in the market, if I do business, I always try to identify with the correct layer. And I can tell you that if I ask people, so what is your focus? They all say, well, we want to have added value. We want to focus on top level. But every level has their own requirements. And leather is highly appreciated in the top level of the market. We all know the Dior's and Dolce & Gabbana. We know the YouTube movies where beautiful leather bags are being handmade, manufactured, amazing. And the good thing about these products is they represent a value, even after years, sometimes even more than the original price. So they're being cherished, they're being maintained, and they are being resold. And that's what we actually want in all layers of the market, but it's not happening. So we have the second layer, the mid-level, that is fashion-inspired products for reasonable price, changes every season, and that's where the volume is, and that's also the level where most companies target on. The low level, however, is the most confusing level, and I'll explain to you later why, because that's price driven. Low level is quantity, volume, market share, and price. Next slide. So have a look. This is top level. We have the Christian Dior's. These are products often made in Europe. As we've seen, Italy is one of the biggest exporters, the biggest exporter. And when I talk to factories in Pakistan and Ethiopia, they always compare themselves with Bangladesh, for example. Bangladesh is so cheap, but nobody looks at Italy. And I think if you are focused in countries like Pakistan, India, Ethiopia, you need to look at Italy. You need to see how you can use the experience, what the Italians are doing, how they are adding value in order to increase your profitability and especially the product level of your product. This is a special layer within the market. It's not an easy a market. It's high quality. Often the accessories are developed, especially developed in Italy. It's an expensive layer and you need to be ready to service this layer in the market. Next one. The mid-level layer, we see a lot of different developments there, often inspired by the top level. And one of the trends that I see there is people want to reduce the leather parts in a leather bag, and they start to mix leather bags with sustainable materials. Hemp, for example, is one material that is being used. Leather is generally expensive, as we know. So if we combine it with sustainable and cheaper materials, the sales price goes down in the store, and that's what makes it interesting. So one of the major trends on the mid-level is that it's no longer about 100% leather bags. And the next level. This is the low level, and this is confusing. Honestly, I went to Zalando and I selected leather, and these are the pictures that popped up. And you can see an iPhone bag for $7.99. This is not true leather, but as a consumer, how can you see it? It is the difference between real and fake is almost unrecognizable, and it's being presented as faux leather. So how, as a consumer, are you able to see the difference? That's difficult. Then next to that, what is also happening here is that people mix fake leather with real leather in one product. Identical color, identical structure, it feels the same, it looks the same, but it's not 100% leather. And that's how we can get to the lower price level. So this is a very, very high competitive, but also high volume part of the market, which you need to be ready for. My strategy would be different, and I explain to you what I would do. Next one. So first thing we need to realize is that as a manufacturer of leather products, our responsibility is not only our factory. Our responsibility is the entire supply chain. Leontina explained already that there are a lot of stories to be told, and it's very funny because if I look in the chat right now, I see, for example, a company called Oleago offering their biodegradable new leather replacements, and there are some others doing the same. There has been recently a test has been done by ISO on leather replacement, so vegan leathers and biodegradable leathers and so non-leathers actually. And they discovered that, for example, materials like Pinatex, a leather made from fake leather made from a pineapple, it takes more time to degrade in nature than real leather. And why? Because it's mixed with polyesters. So it's good to tell a story. It's good to work on materials that are much more environmental friendly, but if we say something, we need to prove it. And who's responsible for that? It's not the buyer, it's not the manufacturer, it's not the supplier of the leather or the fake leather. It's every single stakeholder in the supply chain. That's something that responsible we need to take as a collective. Next one. So my tip is, as you can imagine, everybody's focusing on handbags, which is highly competitive. Many people forget niche markets, and there are so many good niche markets to find internationally. I was talking to somebody today about pet clothing, the belts for pets. It's big volume. It's no longer niche. The niche today is the volume tomorrow. And that's where we need to look at the market really open-minded. Furniture, home decoration, baseball gloves, these are all niche products that request a high skill in the country, but is much less competitive than the handbags. So if you are a handbag manufacturer or an accessory manufacturer, look at the market open-minded and see where niche markets can offer you opportunity. Next one. So innovate. It's important to innovate. Nobody is looking for a supplier that can manufacture a basic bag in a basic quality. Everybody is looking for special, and the main focus right now is impact. Come with innovative solutions that can help the buyer to comply. You don't need to invent anything. Everything is out there in the market. Collaborate, source, go to fairs, go to Turkey, go to Italy, go to Pakistan, talk to suppliers, share information, and make sure you reduce your impact throughout the entire supply chain and not only in your factory. That's the way to open doors to buyers in the EU market. And honestly, that's the only way right now. Next one. And that's it. So I'll pass the mic to Mirte again.
Yes, so thank you so much, Giovanni. It's very wonderful to hear how passionate you talk about leather as a product in terms of its unique appearance, its usage. And it's very important to note that it is always important to be open-minded, look for new opportunities, trends, entering niche markets. And we have talked a lot about sustainability throughout this whole webinar already. And a really good innovator, someone who's very knowledgeable about this topic, is our next speaker, Peter. So Peter, I would like to give the floor to you.
Thank you very much, Mirte, and it is a pleasure for me to share my experience the last decade, so to say, with a factory and an importer in Holland to a more sustainable tannery, and I would like to share the steps we took during those years from 2009. 2009, it was my, well, before I continue, I would like you all to consider the next question I have indeed. Can you invite a European buyer to your own factory at this very moment? And also keeping in mind all the actual legislation, what is already mentioned, regarding due diligence and so on, and also going backwards into your own supply chain. I think that is an important thing to keep in mind and to think about it. So I don't need any answers right away, but it is, I think, good for you all to really consider this and think seriously about this. Anyway, 2009, I have not too much time, I think, and I want to tell a story what took 10 years in about 15 minutes, but I will do my best. 2009, I went for the very first time to India and visited some suppliers for one of the biggest importers I worked for during 14 years. And it was my very first experience, and I noticed that it was not really a shock, but circumstances were much different than I was used to. So when I came back to Holland, I simply asked to start up the discussion together with the Indian supplier, how we can improve circumstances, how we can become more sustainable, although at that moment it was not really a topic as it is now, and we were wondering in what kind of factory do you want to work with. So I think it's very important to look with your own eyes, and if possible also with the European eyes, how the factory is, and I mean, you see a few pictures over there, and especially the second one and the third one shows a lot of difference. And I would prefer to work in the factory with an organized chemical storage, like the last, or like the third picture. important is not only to discuss it with the top management, but also with the middle management and with your employees. You shall be surprised how the employees can give suggestions, because they work there the entire day, day in, day out. So it's important to involve them too. Explain to them why it is necessary, because it is already mentioned before by Leontina, there is so much legislation at the moment, and there is upcoming legislation like the CSRD, like the CSDDD, EUDR, and so on and so on. You need to explain that these kind of issues, topics are important for European buyers to choose a business partner. And once you can comply these things, it is good to also show it to people, to buyers. Indeed, also as already said, in exhibitions and so on. I think it's necessary to create an atmosphere in your factory where people are happy to work, where people are proud to work, where they are, and then they will become more and more loyal to you. That is also very important. You need to make a plan and to step by step make improvements and changes in your factory. And it is not necessary to do it all alone, because you can always ask help from organizations. In our case, it was Solidaridad who helped the factory in India a lot with simple things like the desalting machine, which you see on this picture on the slide. Instead of soaking it, it is just a simple, relatively cheap machine which takes out the salt from the hides, and you catch up the salt again, and you can use it again. They placed solenoid valves with a microprocessor. It creates a reduction of 50% of water. For instance, the tallow machine, as I call it, simple, which extracts fat from the flesh, is used for animal feed and for cosmetics. They used this is the circularity part, which is also very important for European buyers. They used the waste of the of the wet glue to make paver blocks for the parkings and so on. So altogether, it is, and then you, of course, you have to make this plan, and together with organizations like Solidaridad or LWG or SA 8000 to comply social and to comply environmental, you can step by step become more and more attractive for buyers, because if, well, how do you say that, if you are attractive for a buyer, they can, you create a kind of credibility and reliability and loyalty, and that is important also for the long-term goals, because it's quite simple. If you want to change your factory and if you want to change the circumstances, it will also cost money, and so you have to earn money also, and that's only possible when you have the right customers. And at the end, I would like to end more or less with the most important thing is you are working with people, for people. You're working on a planet, and that is very important. So why should you do it? Not only to earn money for yourself, but also money for the people working in your factory, to make it better for to create a more sustainable production the better for a better environment, you have a lot of you have a competitive advantage, as it says, and consumers are finding sustainable products more and more important, and well, complying to all the standards, which are a lot of standards at this very moment, and it will become more, is what I said before, important for buyers, so that they can rely on your information, that they can rely on your data you provide, and that creates a very good relationship between you and European buyers. I think I told in a nutshell the most important things. Again, realize it is not a road which you can do within a few weeks or within a few months. The experience I have took about 10 years, but the advantages and the benefits for the related factory were huge, and there was a huge growth in the last 10 years, and it is very impressive to see the difference between a situation in 2009 and the situation, let's say, 2019. It took energy, it took sometimes there were problems, and it costs money, but at the end I know for sure the benefit is much more than all the issues before. I hope I made a little bit clear how to act and what to do in your road to sustainability, and I think that's the future for especially also leather. It is good for leather, it is good for the image of leather, and at the end it's good for people and planet. I hope again you have something, you can do something with it, and if you have any questions, just feel free and ask the questions. Thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, thank you so much, Peter, for this wonderful presentation. So we are now at the Q&A, and I still see questions coming in, so still feel free to use the question panel. But one of the very first questions that was actually addressed is also concerning trends, other types of leather. So there's a particular question coming in from Uganda, from a crocodile farmer, who actually has a question which I would like to ask to Leontina. What do you expect to happen in terms of the future of exotic leather? How do you think that will develop on the European market?
Right, thank you. Right, in terms of exotic leather, well, I think just from a consumer point of view, I'll put my hand up and say I don't have a huge amount of experience in exotic leather, but from a European consumer's point of view, it's a little bit very, very niche. A lot of people don't, they find it more difficult to accept exotic leather, like, for example, crocodile these days. I think it's easier for them to look at that and say, oh, that's cruel, even though, you know, we are meat eaters generally, so in our minds, you know, cow leather is just very normalized. So from a consumer point of view, I think that's you know, I think that alternatives to that that create the aesthetic of, for example, crocodile leather has a lot of potential in the future. As I said, my experience is rather limited. Giovanni, do you have any further thoughts on that? I only have my EU consumer perspective on that.
Yeah, the problem with exotic leather is that in the past it represented value. It was very special if you had a bag made from the skin of a snake or a crocodile, and that's where legislation came in, because they often were protected animals, and the legislation prevented a lot of exotic leathers to get into the EU market. So first recommendation would be study the EU legislation if you consider exporting. The next is something that also Leontina highlighted somehow, which is very funny. I don't know why it is, but if we see a bag made from cow leather, we don't see the cow. We see a material, which is leather. But if often we see a bag made from, for example, a crocodile, we still see the shape of the animal. And I don't know why, but many consumers find that cruel. And that's related to animal cruelty. So it is appreciated, but it's not really valued. And there are a lot of limitations in the EU market selling and exporting exotic leathers.
Thank you so much, Leontina and Giovanni. So there's also a lot of questions, of course, raising about sustainability. And one of the questions is actually, I would like to address to you, Peter. So there is a lot of pressure on the manufacturing side. And the question is actually, do you think buyers are they aware of this? Do you think they will be willing to offer a good price? And what do you think are essential steps for actually the consumers to be aware of all the pressure in terms of legislation and so on? How can the manufacturers be sure that there's a good price for their products?
It's a lot of questions in one sentence. But I remember the first question about the awareness of European buyers about legislations and so on. And I must say that the buyers from bigger companies, from big retail chain stores, are, to be honest, more aware than those from SMEs. On the other hand, it is unavoidable at the moment. I mean, you read about it every day about new legislations. So yes, in my opinion, anyway, they should be aware. But most of them, and especially again the big retail chain stores, are aware about all the sustainability demands and so on. Then the second part, Mette, about from your question was, can you repeat it please for me?
Yeah, so that was about what are essential steps for consumers to be aware of all the pressure that is on the manufacturers.
Yeah. That's let's say the essential steps. I think, yeah, Giovanni, can you please also help me a little bit with a clear answer? I mean,
no problem.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
I know what to say, I know, but to bring it up words.
Consumers have been often fooled with nice stories, and that's why we introduced a new legislation that forbid nice stories without proof.
Yeah.
So of course we care as a consumer, but ultimately we are still focused on price. And but stories represent more and more value. Are we always trusting what is being told? No, we don't. And what does a certification mean if it's attached to a product? Well, for us, it's more like a proof that it's good quality. But are we willing to pay more money? Well, that's always the same question that we get, and which the market is competitive. But I can, well, I'm now overlapping with another question also. But
if I can add, there might be there is something coming up within a few years, the so-called digital product passport, and this can create a lot of clearness and due diligence also for the consumer, because then they can easily see all the steps taken from let's say raw material to the moment they buy the product. All the steps in between will be, you will be able to see all those steps, and that gives you a honest story about the certain product.
I would like to reply several questions on how can we start business with the EU, or how can we get buyers. You can find many reports on the CBI site about that. 10 tips for doing business with EU buyers, for example. So I highly recommend to read the reports. But the question you need to ask yourself is, what are you selling? Often manufacturers are still making the mistake that they think they're selling a product. You're not selling a product. 60% of what you're selling is your organization. You're selling certification, you're selling reliability, you're selling good communication, you're selling sourcing, you're selling design support. That's what you're selling. 40% is product. So if you want your buyer to pay a reasonable price for your product, don't focus on your product. Focus on selling and introducing your organization. Focus on telling a story that highlights everything that's special in your organization. So if you decided to invest in chrome-free tanning, which I highly recommend, sell it. Show the buyer, educate the buyer why it's good that you have chrome-free tanned leather, what the process is, why it's more expensive, because all these stories will enable the buyer to share the stories and get more money from the consumers, which ultimately is the way you're getting paid a reasonable price. If you just focus on this is a leather bag and this is the price without telling why your organization is so special, the buyer will always compare you with any other cheap manufacturer across the world. So focus on selling your organization.
Thank you so much, Peter and Giovanni. So there's also as well more questions on the sustainability aspect as well as polluting. So one of the questions we have from the audience is actually asking to what extent the leather production is more environmentally polluting than other apparel. Leontina, do you feel comfortable answering this question? Leontina, I think you are muted.
Sorry. There is no such thing as 100% sustainable production for any product. It's all relative. So when you said the question was to what extent is it more polluting, I think some of the statistics that I presented show, Sustainable Apparel Coalition calls it the third most environmentally the third highest negative impact of all textiles. But I did go also on to say that we have to take that into the context of circularity now. I think also Giovanni mentioned that, if you take the entire lifespan of leather, then it becomes much more sustainable. So there's production, hugely environmentally impactful, but if it's like Giovanni said, through 3 generations of use, it becomes much more sustainable. So it is all relative. If you're looking at maybe a cotton t-shirt will have a lot of an organic cotton t-shirt, let's say, which uses less pesticides, less water, less energy perhaps to produce than a normal cotton t-shirt, which, as we know, uses a huge amount. But then if that's thrown away after 2 months or after 6 months, then that actually has a huge environmental impact. So it is all relative. And as we say that, if you focus on doing what you can, if you can focus on more responsible leather, both in terms of animal welfare, the conditions, as well as chemicals and all the other aspects that you can, then you are reducing that element, but also you're involved in a product that will last a lifetime or 2. And that is also very important for the EU. All these different circular models, rental, resell, sharing, the sharing economy. Leather is very, very a big fit for that kind of model, and that's what the EU is pushing. So my answer is that it's all relative. It's you can compare, but you have to take a whole life cycle view of it.
Okay, thank you, Leontina. So I actually have another question for you, Giovanni. So in your presentation, you already explained how difficult it is for consumers to differentiate between between real and fake leather. Another challenge that many manufacturers are facing is, of course, the prevalence of counterfeit leather goods, which is undermining their reputation as well as the sales. So what would you say in terms of tips or how to combat this from your experience?
Yeah, well, it's a difficult one because imitation leather is sometimes really difficult to notice as a consumer. So the only tip I can give you there is you need to think in how you present your products. What I think always helps is if you have a hang tag with a clear explanation. As Peter also said, with the product passport it becomes more easier, but a hang tag showing where the product comes from, how the product is made, educate the consumer, add a swatch of leather for reference, referring to the fact that it's real leather, and if it's environmental friendly, like chrome-free tanned, try to include it as much as possible in the presentation of your product. That would be my recommendation.
Okay, wonderful. So maybe another question to you, Peter. So you talked a lot about the sustainability goals. So how would you say are leather manufacturers and maybe retailers in the European market responding to the sustainability goals, such as in the EU Green Deal? What are some of the strategies that they're implementing to ensure compliance with environmentally friendly practices in their production process and supply chain?
Well, what you can see more and more factories are becoming certified by organizations like Leather Working Group for the environmental side, and for instance SA 8000 for the compliance side. And this is a proof that they are following and complying certain rules. Of course, there are much more organizations who can help you, but for me, those are the two most known organizations. And once you have these certificates, it shows indeed that you are taking it all very serious. Of course, there are an organization like Amfori BSCI. They can do audits for the. In the meantime, also as well environmental BEPI, as well social BSCI, SEDEX, for instance. So yes, you can see more and more factories are certified, are getting certificates or audits. That's quite a difference, by the way, an audit or a certificate. And also the requirements from the European customers are getting more and more strict, and they simply select on those kind of things. So it is important that you have this, and they will. What I said also, when you go to sustainability, so to say, it opens doors easier. I will not say very easy, but always easier, because there is still a lot of competition, but it makes it a little bit easier to enter the European market.
Can I just add a little there? I think we've just focused in general about sustainability, and certification is important, but also if they're talking about practical things, what they can implement within the organizations, there is, if you're looking at the chemicals side, implementing a chemicals management system that is fully functional you can look at ZDHC has a lot of information on there about how to do that. They have templates. And you can, that's also a way of proving to your supplier that you are doing the right things that can support, proving to your buyer that you're doing the right things that can support them in their goals. It's really important to look at what can I do to support those buyers in providing what they need to in order to comply with legislation and future industry requirements. Again, as I mentioned before, a supplier monitoring system. that collects data from your suppliers and records it. So you can also show progress to your buyers. This is what we've done within this year. This is how we've improved. And use that as a story. Communicate that on your website. I think everyone, if you look at how retailers and brands are communicating what they call their sustainability journey, people are being open about the fact that they are not there yet. And it's okay, you know, consumers are accepting of the fact that a brand is trying, and they're showing their roadmap. They're showing where they want to go and where they are now. Suppliers can use the same way to present their goals, what they are doing and where they are, and their progress to buyers. And that is also something that, you know, it's like going on a journey together with the buyers. So it's creating a story as well in terms of your communication and your marketing.
Okay, great addition from your side, Leontina. So actually another question is actually related to that, is how open or willing do you think EU consumers in purchasing from a brand based out of a developing country, how willing do you think they are? Do they make a very conscious decision about this or not? Do you think this is something on their minds? Giovanni, do you maybe have some experience?
Yeah, I would like to combine some questions all together in my reply. Consumers care for one thing right now, that's price, product price. Yeah, it's always been like that, but we need to change. And there is one legislation that we haven't discussed yet, which will change also the entire industry, which is carbon tax. Right now, it is the situation that if you make a leather bag in a very dirty way, you don't care about the environment as long as it's cheap. And somebody else makes the exact same leather bag, but is very, very concerned about the environment, minimizes the impact, and therefore is more expensive. One example, for example, is they get the leather from Scandinavia instead of Ethiopia. What happens is that, well, most probably the one who's cheap gets the order. That's not in line with what we want as a European community. We want the market to be focusing on green manufacturing. So that's why we're discussing a carbon tax, which means that we will have a look at how is this product being produced. Is it this product produced in a very dirty way? Then you need to pay tax if you export it to Europe. Is this product manufactured in a very clean way? You probably will face zero tax when you import to or export to the European Union. This will change not only the entire industry, but this will also change the opportunity that EU-based manufacturers have. For example, there's a question on leather skins from Denmark, Anna Eklund. I fully agree. It is complicated to compete with countries where labor costs are much lower than Scandinavia. Don't forget to look at Italy. I mean, Italy is very similar if we look at the GDP and the living standard and wages compared to Scandinavia. So your competition is more Italy than let's say Africa or China. But if we introduce the carbon tax, then you will gain massively because your product stands out on the impact part of the entire industry. So I think on the long term, investing in sustainability within the entire supply chain will enable everybody that wants to export to get more business and export.
Okay, thank you so much, Giovanni, for already combining some of the questions, because that was actually one of the next questions that I wanted to address. So there's also a question on whether you think that leather products designers of European countries, how they can cooperate with leather product manufacturers of developing countries to design their products based on the needs of European buyers. If so, what would be the first steps here?
So to clarify the question, do you mean how can manufacturers in developing countries approach like collaborations with European designers? Is that what?
Yes, exactly. What would be some good steps on where to start?
Perhaps I can refer to an example of one of the CBI programs in Ethiopia. We have a 4-year program in Ethiopia where we collaborate with the design support as part of the CBI program. So next to CBI, there are other development organizations that do the same. So if you are based in a development country, look at organizations like CBI, GIZ, UNIDO, USAID. Often they have a design service. I mean, labor in Europe is expensive. So hiring a designer will cost a lot of money. Which makes it, of course, difficult. On the other hand, if you want to export, you cannot do it with products that have a local handwriting. That won't work. Europeans don't like it. So you need to invest in design. So either you develop your own skills, and thank God for YouTube. I mean, you can learn a lot on how to design. Or hire a designer from abroad. Sometimes you see constructions like a commission. Like if we start selling and your style is selling well, you get an X amount of every product that has been sold. So be creative in the way you cooperate with designers. Hire them if you have the money, but for sure invest in design. That would be my recommendation.
Would another alternative maybe to contact some design schools, some some apparel fashion design schools, and see if there are any students that are willing to engage in a project with you? Just sort of thinking a little bit outside the box.
For sure. The problem I often experience if I work in development countries is that designers are mainly focused on the trends in their own country. And they don't have the ambition to export to the EU market. So finding a designer that really can pick up an EU trend and translate it into a new collection needs time, development of skills, and investment. But for sure, collaboration with local design academies, I would also highly recommend. Good suggestion.
Okay, thanks so much. So there's a very specific question regarding Ethiopia, where a lot of the programs, factories focus sometimes on very simple, small tasks to test their skills. What would you advise to how they can, for example, enter the European market? How can that complement some of the needs that we see?
Well, it's a good question. Well, Ethiopia is a special country because they have massive amount of leather, they have a well-developed industry, but they still struggle because the skins are small, the quality of the skins, the animals are mainly bred for consumption, so the skins are a side product, they're damaged, there's a lot of waste, which all increases the price of a final product. Yes, minimum wage is low, but that's not the only reason why they should be able to compete. It needs a reliable, high quality supply chain. And then if that all is well developed, then they are able to compete on the international market. So how do you compete on the international market? If you are a smaller factory, like many are in Ethiopia, focus on design, invest in design, focus on developing more higher quality products, and be flexible, be able to manufacture small quantities. So you target also the smaller shops and retailers. On the other hand, you could also focus on producing simple styles in high volume, because if you have simple styles, for example, with no accessories, one of the limitations in Ethiopia is the availability of quality accessories. So if you design a product that is simple to make with no accessories, then you will see the efficiency of production goes up. If the quantity is bigger, people will start moving faster because they do the same product day in, day out. So yes, a strategy could also be focusing on easy products in higher volumes. Would that be best for Europe? I think I don't know what the status right now is with the AGOA arrangement with the US market, but I would focus selling those products more towards the US market, because they are paying 33% import duties from China and 0 from Ethiopia. I don't know if that's still the case, but as part of the AGOA arrangement, that was the case. So if you want to export to Europe, design focused, quality products, small quantity, high flexibility, that would be my focus. If you want to export to the US, easy styles, more volume products, and of course price aggressive, that would be my focus towards the US market.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks a lot, Giovanni. So now I have just my final question to all the speakers, which is a little bit of a difficult one because we talked about so many aspects, which is actually, if you would summarize everything that was discussed today, what would be your main final tip to our audience members that are interested or about to export to the European market? What do they have to focus on as a first priority?
Shall I go first? I think I've focused on this quite a bit, and I'll reiterate. I think it's data. Being open with your process, being open with your information, collecting information throughout your supply chain, and really providing buyers with the information they need to comply with legislation, and also the information they need in this environment, in this market that's growing, to prove what they're claiming, to give them a story to tell.
Shall I be the second one?
Yes.
You can answer, Giovanni. Well, I think regarding the road to sustainability, just start and realize it is a timeline, not from a few months but from a few years, to be honest. On the other hand, it will give you the benefits later, and your goal should be to, what I said earlier, to become a factory inviting buyers to buy from you, and become a credibility, loyalty, and reliable factory, and that only you can only reach that by just step by step. Begin today and make a plan and focus you on the future.
Yeah. For me, what I always recommend is don't wait until the business comes to you, because that will never happen. Get out there. People sometimes think that fair participation is the right start, and then they go to a fair and wait until customers come in. That will not work. You need to be proactive. You need to be aggressive in entering the market and entering the EU and entering the EU buyers, because if you're not doing it, every other person will do it. Build relationship, get to know the market, get to know local legislation, get to know the requirements, payment conditions, because as I told before, it's all about selling your organization, selling the quality of your organization, and then product will follow. So that would be my recommendation. Success of business starts with you and with nobody else.
Okay, thank you so much. And then actually from my side, of course, the best tip that I can give is, of course, to check out the CBI website for all the wonderful market intelligence reports that we have, which have been discussed, including on exporting leather bags and accessories to Europe. So I'm now just going to show my screen with you so you can have a quick look on where to find this information. So as mentioned, you first go to the CBI website, which is www.cbi.eu, and then you just go here to market information. And as you can see, apparel is the very first sector mentioned here. You click on it, and here you see all the different kind of studies that we have available. So sector studies, tip studies, which are very, very useful, including on where to find buyers, how to go digital, green, how to export, how to organize it. And we have, of course, also many different product fact sheets. And we will be soon updating our reports also to include the product fact sheets on leather. So please make sure to check out all the reports. They're free of use. You can download them, so you can check them out at a later stage. And that's actually all for today. So I would really want to thank all the speakers for their wonderful insights. And I want to thank you so much for listening in. And this is really the end of the presentation. So we will be sharing afterwards the presentation slides with you. And thank you so much. And we look forward to welcoming you at a future CBI event.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.